just taking a quick look at this new Gendome GO 300. So this is a new model from a company maybe you haven't even heard of before, but it's not their first power station. So they actually have the Home 3000, which is kind of like a large backup system. Really cool, actually, if you're looking for something for home backup that, wasn't going to take up a lot of space in your house, and it might even just look good in your living room. It had this real tall, narrow design on caster wheels. So yeah, they've kind of gone to the exact opposite end here of the spectrum. So this is a very tiny, very portable unit. In fact, it's nearly the same size as the Jackery 300 Plus. And this is impressive because this does have LFP batteries. So yeah, I mean, typically the Jackeries are always like the lightest in class. And actually what makes it really impressive is that the specs on this thing completely blow the Jackery 300 Plus out of the water. I mean, this is like way better across the board. And we'll also compare it to the new EcoFlow River 3 Plus, because that's a very impressive unit. And so yeah, you might be surprised to see that this thing actually can, go head to head with something like that EcoFlow River 3 Plus. So yeah, let's kind of go through the video here. Let's go through the specs and talk about everything that you get with this unit. As I mentioned, 300 class. Yeah, so it's just a 300 watt pure sine wave inverter. Now there's no special feature here. 300 watts, that's what you can power. That's it. Nothing above that. So, there's a pros and cons here, right? I mean, a smaller inverter is nice because it's always more efficient for small electronic devices. But you're not going to be able to power, definitely not going to be able to power, a lot of the typical heating and cooking things, which you can do with the River 3 Plus, right? Because that has a 600 watt inverter and it has the X Boost, which will enable you to power resistive loads that are normally rated up to 1200 watts, right? So that really opens the door for stuff. Now, there is still some stuff you can do with 300 watt inverter. You'd actually be surprised. In fact, I'm going to be making a video here soon talking about what you can actually do as far as like heating up food and stuff like that with the 300 watt inverter. So, it is possible. It is possible. And if you're like me and you like to kind of see the most that you can do with a small inverter, a small efficient inverter, it's kind of fun too. So yeah, definitely check that out. And then, as I mentioned, yeah, 288 watt hours. That's basically about the same as the Jackery and the EcoFlow. But you get actually the specs here, especially when we're talking about USB. USB, there's a lot of, actually, this is by far the best in class. So not only do you get a total of 4, which is more than both the Jackery and EcoFlow, which have 3. But guess what? Guess what the big news is? You get 2 USB-Cs, and they're both 140 watts. And one of them is actually in and out, 140 watts. And they actually state that you can do 140 watts simultaneously. That's on both of them. So 140 watts coming out of each USB-C. So that's big time power, isn't it? That's actually, there's a lot of larger power stations that don't even have that ability. So this is very impressive. If you're really heavy on USB devices, especially like something like a MacBook or something, MacBook Pro, something that uses a lot of power, this thing's going to be amazing to have on hand, isn't it? And of course, a small power station is just always better to be using DC power anyways, and just kind of skip the inverter really. So, and then, by the way, just kind of just mention this here real quick since we're talking about that indoor backup power. Yeah, this thing, the inverter doesn't even have a UPS mode either. So, you really are going to be using this for DC. And, if the power goes out, then you can plug stuff into it, sure, but there's not going to be any kind of automatic switch over, right, from grid. And since we're talking about, basically having power come in through the wall or through grid power, yeah, so there's no, as mentioned, there's no UPS mode, there's no bi-directional inverter on this thing. So the only way you can charge this thing from grid power is if you have a USB adapter, right, for your wall socket. And then you charge, going into the USB-C port. Now, they do give you one, so that's good. They give you one. The only thing is it's only 65 watts. So, this thing's capable of charging at 140 watts from USB-C, but you'd have to, if you want to do that, you'd have to get your own, power power charger, basically, right? Turbocharger. So those aren't cheap, right? I think 140 watt USB-C wall charger is like $100 or something, right? So, but yeah, hey, at least they do give you one. They give you one, so that's nice. And then for solar, actually, this is like incredible specs here. They say 200 watts. So again, like compared to the Jackery is just pathetic, isn't it? Basically 100 watts, and it's only a USB-C. That's all. That's the only input that thing has. So this is an actual barrel port, dedicated inputs. Now, what's kind of unusual about this product is they have this barrel port is like bidirectional. It's actually dual purpose. So DC output or solar input. There's some compromises here, right? I mean, it's nice. It gives you the functionality you want. You could run like, a 12-volt refrigerator off this thing, or you could do a lot of solar inputs. But you're not going to be using that port, for both of those things at the same time. Now, because it does have the bidirectional USB-C, you can still have solar going in there, right? And say you wanted to have a 12-volt car fridge or something 12-volt powered at the same time, you could do it. But obviously the USB-C is not going to be as ideal for solar input, and you're not going to be able to get as much power, right? So yeah, now the one thing to mention too about the 200 watts is that's the only spec they give. So, what are we talking about with amps and the voltage range, right? We don't know. And, that is sometimes some of these smaller power stations, they'll say like 200 watts, and then they'll say like 8 amps max, right? And like 30 volts max, which basically means you'd have to have like some super rare solar panel. So I would be surprised if it could do more than 8 amps, but maybe it can. I mean, who knows? Maybe it can. And then the other downside of this shared port is the DC output probably isn't regulated. Okay, so that's where, most power stations nowadays, they're regulated, around 12, 13 and a half volts, right? So no matter what the battery's at, whether it's at 80% or whether it's at 10%, you get the same output voltage, right? Which is just great. So you can run 12-volt appliances no matter what the battery's at, right? Now, to top this thing off, to literally top it off, there's a wireless charger on top. So actually interesting too, a lot of companies are getting rid of that, aren't they? So yeah, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about that. Do you guys even use those wireless chargers? And by the way, that dual purpose port, yeah, you can charge it from a car as well. And unlike, a lot of budget brands, they've actually invested in getting this thing certified. Not just, the UL rating, but this drop proof rating as well. So you have, it's not going to break on you, right, if you accidentally drop it. It's kind of the key thing. And that is, important too when we're talking about a portable power station, right, that you're going to be taking with you on adventures and stuff like that. Now this, again, is something that might surprise you, smart app control on this thing. And actually it looks like, they don't show the app features too much, but they do have this little, graphic here, adjustable power output and input. That's interesting. Electric, usage history, light switch for multi-scene. So yeah, this product does have a light on the front, and it's much better than the Jackery's light, right? The Jackery just has that little spotlight that's just going to blind you. It's not going to really light up a room. It'd be good for a flashlight, but it's not going to light up a room. So yeah, this one has a nice big panel light, kind of real similar to the EcoFlow, in fact. So yeah, this is just like a real solid looking portable power station, isn't it? The EcoFlow does still have a lot of advantages, as far as being able to expand it, and that inverter as well, right, is much more capable. But, if you really want something small and portable that can really just do primarily USB stuff and, have excellent, really, these are like top of the class spec.